someone loosened the freight cars that they pulled in at night to unload the building materials. They got loose somehow, and then it's downhill from campus to downtown. So three freight cars came in and crashed into the building and destroyed 2 of the streetcars and 1 of the interurban cars. I'm not sure how they handled that, but they had to bring in cars from other places. But by 1926, the game was pretty much over for city streetcar service, so they probably had cars in Fort Dodge or could buy them relatively cheap at that time. Again, we have the yard, we have the model over there next to us in the other building. Okay, 1926, this is a 1926 campus map, and that section on, oops, are you there? There it is. Yeah, Sheldon and Knapp is gone. So it may have been put in 1916 and then may have been taken out by 26. And so they reverted back to the original plan of going back and forth to campus. Either the bi-directional thing got people confused, or it just added more time and there wasn't a profit in it, because they did make decisions based on making a profit. A couple of campus views. This is where the Cyride Garage is now. This is about University Avenue here at Power Plant. This is the pedestrian bridge I showed you was washed out in that flood picture. So it's all trees there now, but it was wide open back then. And then this is a streetcar in campus. Okay, so what finished off the streetcars? Well, buses, of course. So there was some competition. The Yellow Hood Taxi Company operated taxis, and I like this ad because it says, "We just completed installing heaters in our cars." So you get a little more comfortable. In good transportation, a good taxi service and a good bus system go hand in hand. If you have a strong bus system, you usually have a good taxi system because people are traveling without their personal automobile. But there was some competition. The Hutchison bus lines, which we have very little information on, and there was a red cab too in town, which we think might have been tied into Hutchison, was the competition to Campus Town and started a bus service. 1929 is when the last streetcar ran, and then the Fort Dodge line ran buses, their own buses, to replace the streetcars. They kept promising the streetcar would come back the next year, so we've been waiting 70, 80 something years. Who knows when it'll come back. Here's another nice shot of the Fort Dodge Terminal with their freight motor there. This is the track. This is Grand Avenue before, the underpass. Many of you remember the bridge here where the trains used to go through downtown. We have a nice panel about train delays and Mayor Goodland and how he fought about train delays, and pictures of derailments and all kinds of things, and Ames and all kinds of, lots of accidents at this intersection. This is the Ames High Field House, about where Hy-Vee Gas is now. Because Ames High, of course, was City Hall, and that's where the field house activities were. Nice shot of the Grand Avenue construction. This is the line I just showed you going to Des Moines. This is the main line. And then this is the Fort Dodge Terminal. And what I found interesting is that the Fort Dodge line continued to cross the Northwestern until this was built. Even though the passenger service went out in 1929, they continued to switch Shoneman's Lumber, which is where Wheatsfield is now. Shoneman's Lumber was switched by the Fort Dodge line as a freight switching operation from 29 until 37, until that. And then after 37, the state didn't put the tracks in Main Street there, so the Northwestern switched Shoneman's. This is another interesting, this is a gas station that right there on, this is the DOT. But there were coal yards, this is fuel tanks here, and they used to bring gasoline before pipelines came by train. And there were several of these tank farms located in Ames, and also coal, because most houses and apartments were heated by coal at the time. Another shot of the Fort Dodge Terminal with the field house in the background. This is the DOT. That's changed a little bit. That building's still there, and the big building's off to the right. But you can see they would bring a car in here, and they could unload the gasoline right into the tanks there. This stuff on this train is the water tower that was at 24th and Hayes, which is now down, but it was built in '58. And everything was delivered by rail and then transloaded onto a truck and taken up there to 24th and Hayes for the construction. Okay, we're going to finish with, fortunately it said 7 a.m. to 8:15 a.m. on the thing down there, so I guess I have another 12 hours to go. I'm supposed to finish 12 hours ago. This is the City of Ames, Engineering Public Works, and the map, and we still have the line going through Campus Town. It's freight only now, all the passenger trains are gone, and then it does show some spurs up into campus. There was 2 tracks here. I was told that they did a lot of cattle and sheep, and would bring in flocks of sheep or whatever. You know, Vet Med was right here where Lago Marcino is, so they would bring them in. And you had the horse barns, which are still there, so they would bring animals in by train. Okay, another timetable. We can't spend too much time on that. There were 2 passenger trains in each direction in 1950. This is all the scheduled freight trains. This is really fun to go through this one. Ames, the freight service was at night. They had a freight train left Boone at 11 o'clock, came over to Ames, did some switching, and then went down to Huxley, and the Milwaukee Road went through there, and then it came back to Ames from Huxley. So our theory is that whatever they picked up in Ames, if there was cars going to Des Moines, they would leave them in Huxley, but there was probably some freight movement off of the Milwaukee Road, coal or some kind of consistent commodity where they went there every day. So they actually made 2 movements in Ames in 1950. One is at 11:30 and the other is at 2 a.m. These are the final shots of the Fort Dodge. This is the last train, and somehow I was just sitting in my office and heard a train come by. Happened to have a camera, and ran out and took some pictures. And this is the last train to go down the track. ISU, when they rebuilt the power plant in 1985, brought a lot of the big stuff in by rail. So that's the last locomotive leaving ISU. This is the side-ride garage, and then here's the remainder of the road bed, which is now all tore up with the expansion of the side-ride garage and the bike path and all that stuff. Okay, so why are these buildings so weird in Campus Town? You know, you kind of look and you think, you know, Ames is a city of engineers and scientists. It's not people that build things at Ames, you know? I mean, it's not really creative. It's, we do everything at right angles. You know, we're a 90-degree town, okay? This is where the track went through, where I showed you that earlier track of the guys building the track. This is about where that was taken. And the track went right through here. This is a new building, of course, just in the last couple of years. But these old buildings were designed right along the right-of-way of the track. So that's why I have a few weird-shaped buildings on Campus Town. It's not just because there's weird people in Campus Town. It is, the building was a function of the railroad. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Parks and Rec office, and this is the old ice rink. You can see the right-of-way, especially in the winter, down there going down to Stevens Hill. This building, it's a mail, some kind of distribution, something warehouse, and we think this was the actual storage building for the Fort Dodge. The storage, it's been modified, of course, extensively, but it's certainly at the location of, according to our map, of what was the Fort Dodge car shed. And that's still there. The bus garage after 1929, Midwest, or Fort Dodge Line operated their own buses. They had not really transit buses, they were more a motor coach bus. We're really missing that gap from the 1930s. We're really missing a lot of information. Anything on buses and then we're really intrigued. There's nothing in the newspaper about it, and we don't have pictures on it. But this is the garage. Hunziker apartment uses it as a maintenance building now. It's still there, North 2nd and Oak. And here's a picture of it in 1956 with the school buses. Midwest Transit, which just recently was sold, started or bought the rights to the city service in 1942, we think, 41 or 42, and ran the city buses out of here. And there's a Cyride driver, Stan Olson, that actually worked out of that garage, and he had a lot of good, interesting stories about working there in the 1950s and 60s. So that remnant is still here. That's the car barn location. I mentioned that post office or mail thing. And then we can see a few things in the pavement. If you go out to Knapp Street, you can kind of see the track. It was called a Y. There was the leg coming from Des Moines and the leg coming from campus in Knapp. And you can see where the pavement is cracking and there's rail under there. When Welch was rebuilt a couple of years ago, they cut through the pavement and you can see the rail still there. So there's no rail left on Main Street. When they finished off Main Street, I was down there trying to see if there was anything, but that was all gone. But when they did this end of Main Street 10 or 15 years ago, there was still rail in that. We have a couple of cross sections of rail over across the street at our headquarters. And then this is the main line at Knapp Street where it goes in that alley by those weird shaped buildings. So a few of those remnants are still around. This was a Squaw Creek Bridge, which just was removed. The Hazel, see, I did this a couple of years ago. This is all gone. So I guess I'm documenting this. The Hazel Street crossing was there. They used to use it for storage or maintenance of waste stuff. The circus train in which we have up here somewhere, 1990 was the last train to use that. And that's it. And so I'll be around. I didn't do too bad. So questions, comments, whatever you want to do. I know it's a hot night. The room's pretty hot. And, appreciate everyone coming out. Next month, Rudy Daniels is going to talk about railway post office in the United States. We did have a railway post office train that started in Ames and went all the way to Huron, South Dakota every day. It took like 20 hours to get there or something, really a long train. And then he'll have all kinds of stuff about the railway post office. Then we have Brenda Mainwaring coming in. She's a community relations representative for the Union Pacific. She'll be here in August, I believe, talking about the Union Pacific, or September, talking about the Union Pacific now, 30,000 miles, biggest railroad, all those things it does. And then also in September, the first Saturday in October, we have the ISU Railroad Club coming, and they're going to talk about what's in those trains, where they're going, talk about the locomotives and all. You know, you see them go by all the time, don't you wonder what's in some of them? So they're going to be talking about that, and then some of the trains that can identify where they're going to, coming from, and things like that. So with that, I'll take any questions. Yes?
And one of your first bus schedule pictures that talked about Hawkeye stages?
Yes.
Is that the one that is now headquartered out of
Decorah
College?
Yeah, yeah. It was a predecessor company. I'm not quite sure of the relationship there. White Hawkeye Stages and Fort Dodge were on the same page. It might have been a cooperative relationship, or it might have been an ownership issue, just the same way that the Ames College and the Fort Dodge line were on that document from 1912. So we don't have that corporate history, but there was something going on there. The Fort Dodge sold their buses to Interstate Transit in 1931 and got out of the bus business completely. The Interstate Transit was owned by the Chicago and Northwestern and the Union Pacific, ran buses from Chicago to the West Coast, sort of in competition with the railroad, but also to protect the rights. And then that eventually was sold to Greyhound. And I can do an hour on that too sometime. Yes?
Bob, you might point out why they built railroads in some places. From Fraser to Ogden was built for only one purpose, to the coal mines over at Ogden. And then they'd bring them to Fraser, and then they'd go down to Ames or Des Moines and all over the country.
Right, right.
I have a bill of lading here, kind of interesting, from the Ogden Superior Coal Company. In 1931, they had 69,400 pounds of coal, and the price per ton was $3 charged through the Kelly elevator, which was owned by the Ames elevator back in those days.
Great.
But
that was pretty common. Iowa had a lot of coal. A lot of lines were built there. Minneapolis and St. Louis built that line to Ogden, and there's some stories about that too. I was employed like 1,000 people in the coal mines there in Ogden. And, you know, then once the seam is gone, then pick up the track and go away. Gilbert had a coal mine, didn't have a railroad, but had a coal mine in Zenersville and brought coal home from Gilbert. So, yeah, a lot of interesting activity tying in the economics with the railroad, the business activities with the railroad. Yep.
Yeah, do we know anything at all did they make a transition when the ANC closed down to the FDDMS, or was there a big break, or no?
We really have no idea on that. I'm also involved with the Iowa Railroad Museum over in Boone, and we have a bunch of seniority lists out of Boone with the Fort Dodge and the Northwestern. And I'm not sure we go back to that date, but that's a good question I can throw at them tomorrow. I would guess they probably took most of the. It was easier to run a streetcar than it was to run a steam engine, so I would think they would take most of the people. But it's hard to tell. You know, right now when bus companies get turned over, city bus companies, all the employees have to reapply. They don't all get hired. So when they change management companies, so it may have been something like that too. Hard to tell. Yes.
With regard to the photo of car 208, I've just been doing a bunch of reading in the ISC student and looking at 1914 and 1915, and I ran across a lot of articles about the dissatisfaction in the Fourth Ward leading up to their attempt at secession in 1916,
Right.
complaining that the cars were all overloaded like that on a regular basis, that people were routinely hanging out the cars. And I believe it was in the winter of 1915, in a perhaps not unrelated incident, car 286 burned on campus.
Oh, really?
And it was destroyed, and they brought in a replacement car. So I wonder if 208 might have been the replacement rolling stock.
Could have been. That's a good possibility. Yeah, great. Yeah, I got to talk to you afterwards. Don't go away. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I have two questions. First one is, how reliable was the electricity? Would you be riding along and suddenly just stop?
I think it was as reliable as it could be. You know, I don't know, Harold might know, you know the history of electricity in Ames?
I don't really know, but I've never seen much complaining about it. It's
Yeah.
fairly reliable.
I would think that, you know, storms and that would do it, but I think the power generation, once the technology was developed, and Ames was relatively late. You know, the first streetcars were 1889. And the interurbans really took off about 1900 nationwide in construction. And part of that was the development of AC power so they could transmit over long distances. And that's why that substation at Kelly took AC power from the power plant in Fraser and then stepped it or converted it to DC. And then you could see little cables going along where they would take it to the next section. So I think it would be relatively reliable, but I don't have any data on that.
And my other question is, what happened winter with a big snowstorm? Do they have any equipment to clear it out, or do they just have to wait for it to melt?
No, we have some really good pictures on that. The Farwell Brown collection, which is online from the library, has some good pictures of, well, sometimes they just shoveled it out. They had wedge plows. We got a couple of old plows over in Boone. You know, they didn't have rotaries in Iowa on these lines. But you had pretty good power on these things too, because you had better traction. In a steam engine, you don't have maximum torque at a low speed, whereas an electric motor, you have more torque at a lower speed. So they could get through more snow. But when you have the 8-foot drifts and that, Alfred Butts was a conductor on the railroad for 50 years, started in 1916, and he started taking pictures right away. And he's got some snow pictures with the whole cars covered on it. So yeah, they did get stalled, but hard to tell on that. Yes.
Hey, remind people about the door prize drawing.
Okay, I don't remember. There's a door prize drawing. Sign it?
No, we are doing a door prize drawing, giving away some wonderful train-related materials in the entry boxes right over here. We're pleased to have you enter the drawing.
Thanks for coming out on a hot night, and I'll hang around and go through some pictures or whatever you want to do. Thanks for coming.